Symmetrical spooky houses. Today, we will learn how artists use symmetry in their artwork. We will use a variety of curved lines and shapes in our art, and we will create spooky house designs that are symmetrical, which means the same on both sides. What is symmetry and what is symmetrical balance? Think of balancing on a balance beam. When you're trying to balance, you have to put as much weight on one side of the balance beam as the other side of the balance beam. Taking a look at the balance beams over on the side here, where the two squares are balancing each other out, that is symmetry. That is symmetrical balance. The squares are the same size, the same color, we have the same shape, they balance each other out. Taking a look over here, we see the blocks with the line drawn down the middle. Are the blocks on one side the same as the other side? Yes, they are balanced symmetrically. They have the same exact blocks, shapes, sizes, and colors on the sides. Asymmetrical balance is when it balances out, like in the balance beam with the square and the circle. They're about the same size. The balance beam still balances because there's about the same amount on each side. But it's not the same shape and it's not the same color, so they are not identical. Looking at this side here, where the shapes are balanced differently, this is asymmetrical balance, where things are not exactly the same on both sides. They still have about the same amount, so it balances, but they're not identical. What does this look like for art? Symmetrical art is art that is exactly the same or near exactly the same on both sides. Take a look at this beautiful picture of the Taj Mahal. The red line down the middle shows the line of symmetry. One side of the Taj Mahal is exactly the same as the other side of the Taj Mahal. Artists do this to create a sense of harmony and peace, and it's pleasing to look at. Even the landscaping in front is identical on both sides. We also see a lot of symmetry in nature. Take a look at the butterfly. Butterflies in real life are symmetrical, so artists will often use symmetry in artwork to replicate things that they see in nature, like this beautiful artwork of the butterfly and the picture of the bird below it. Even when we draw people, whether it's cartoon people or people in real life, we try to draw them symmetrical so they appear to be the same on both sides. Asymmetrical art is artwork that still balances, meaning there's still about the same on both sides, but it's not exactly the same to look at. On this picture with the architecture, I've drawn a line down the middle showing you where the line of symmetry would be. But is one side of the building exactly the same as the other side? No, not really. The shapes are a little bit different, and the way that they're placed together is different. The same thing here with the Egyptian sarcophagus. If we were to draw a line down the middle of this treasure of Tutankhamun, we would notice that it is very similar on both sides, especially in the face. But the top of the head here and what Tutankhamun is holding is not the same. So we call that asymmetrical. Even with Van Gogh's Starry Night, the tree is not the same as what's on the other side of the painting. But the artist still balanced the painting out using the tree on one side, balanced with the moon on the other. Artists do this to make sure that their space that they use is used up in a nice way and things look pleasing to look at, but they don't always have to be identical on both sides. We're going to use this idea of symmetry to make symmetrical spooky houses. We're going to start with a pencil and draw each part of the house using basic shapes like circles, squares, rectangles, trapezoids, and triangles. Let's start it with our drawing.
All right, boys and girls, we are going to get started on drawing our awesome symmetrical haunted houses. In Schoology, I gave you a sheet that you can print out to look at. Again, that gives you examples of different symmetrical haunted houses, and then also a step-by-step guide on the back. If you feel like this is something you need to do, you can follow it step by step. But I do want you to use your imagination, and so you don't have to copy any of the ones off of here. Think of this just as building with geometric shapes, only we're trying to balance it so it's the same on both sides. So I'm going to start mine with a long, narrow rectangle shape in the middle, like this. And I'm sketching really, really lightly because I'm going to change that shape in just a minute, and I'll show you why. And then oftentimes haunted houses will have different sections to them because they're older houses, usually Victorian houses. So I'm going to sketch 2 squares very lightly down at the bottom of my paper. And then I'm going to put a trapezoid at the top. And a trapezoid has a long bottom to it, a short line at the top, and 2 curved lines. Now, this is just a basic shape to start a haunted house with. In order to make this look really creative, we're going to curve our lines a little bit, so they're not going to be straight up and down. So now I'm going to get a little fun and curve my lines almost as if my house is tipping. And this is why I'm pushing harder, so you can see what it looks like. And this is how to make a cartoon style house, is by curving your lines a little bit. Like that. Gives it a little fun to it. Now we're trying to balance it so it's somewhat symmetrical, so I'm going to add more shapes on this side. And whatever I add to one side, I'm going to try to do about the same thing to the other side. Now again, your house does not need to look like mine. I think I'm going to put some rectangle windows right here and try to curve them a little bit. And the really cool thing about the windows is you want them to look kind of rickety, like an old house would. And then I'm going to put a little bit of a roof over top of this part of each house. So I'll use some triangles here, triangles there. Now it's starting to look like a house. So I've got 2 windows on each side, 2 roofs on each side, balanced off by 2 square shapes. I think I'm going to work on the door in the middle. There are lots of different door examples in the sheet that I gave you. I like the one where the door has a little bit of a roof over the top of it that kind of goes like this. Looks like a trapezoid at the top. And then it comes down and there is an archway and 2 doors in the middle. And then to really start to add the detail, like the door handles, I could do little spiral lines. I'm going to add some bumpy lines on my roof. I want to add kind of an old rickety looking window, so I'm going to curve it. And by making those unusual shapes, that's what's going to give your house a little creativity to it. We're just trying to balance it out so we have about the same thing on each side. It doesn't have to look exactly. Now the next step after you get your doors and windows on is to go in and add lots of detail. So things like the crossbars in the window which you see in a lot of older houses. Or shutters, that's another thing you see on a lot of older houses. And all of those details are really going to help make it look really unique and special. Another thing that kids like to add to make it look more antique or old is at the top they have these almost like little gates. It's ironwork made out of metal that a lot of the older fancy houses had. You might have seen this if you've ever been downtown Northville. And so that, even just adding that, gives it that kind of older haunted look. And then on the roof, usually the roofs have some type of texture or line pattern to them. You can do bumpy line, you can do crisscross lines, any type of lines to add that detail. Now today we are just starting the sketch for our house. We are not going to finish this house until next week because we're going to need another whole class time to finish up the details, outline it, and add the color. So I want you to really take some time today and add lots of details on your house. Think of how can I add like maybe a really creepy spider web somewhere. Spider webs have those diagonal lines that come out from the center, like this, and then the bumpy lines that connect all of the diagonal lines. So you could put a creepy spider web in the corner to make it look more spooky, or sometimes people like to draw a little ghost or a goblin in the window. I think in my window I'm going to put a candle, because sometimes I think like just a single candle in the middle, like window might look a little spooky. Maybe in this window I'm gonna add a jack-o'-lantern. Over here, add my window frames. You can add texture for the wood. That's another really good thing to do because a lot of the older homes are either made out of bricks, like this, or wood on the side of them. So adding those textures like we learned how to draw is another great way to make your house look more interesting and realistic to look at. You can finish all those details. And then when you're done with your house, boys and girls, we have to think about the yard too, because this is a whole picture. So you can think about, how could I make like a spooky little walkway, maybe that looks kind of rickety, pathway going up to my house. Maybe I'll put some big pumpkins sitting in the front yard. Maybe I want to put a ghost. Maybe I want to do a spooky tree. That's another really fun thing to add. On this sheet, they show how to do spooky trees. They show how to do spooky clouds. So there's lots of suggestions. Sometimes people even like doing like little monsters. So you can go ahead and use that creativity and think about all those details you can add. Our goal today is just to make our house as symmetrical as we can, so it's about the same on both sides. It doesn't have to be exactly the same because that's very hard to do. But we're just learning how to use that symmetry when we make our art today. And then we're going to finish it off with all those textures and details to make our house look really fabulous. And then think about how can we make spooky details in our yard and our sky. And when you're done, just keep it in a safe place for next week, because next week we'll talk about how to do all the coloring. I hope you have fun for your Halloween week drawing your haunted house. See you later. Bye-bye.